Grover Underwood is one of the most beloved characters in the Percy Jackson series. He's kind, selfless, brave, and has been through a lot in his life. In this video, I'm going to go over all of that, breaking down his story from 17 different books. Yeah, I put a lot of work into this video. This is the life of Grover Underwood. Now before we start, a few things. This video is based on the books, not the TV show and not the movie, which means there are a few differences story-wise. Also, there will be spoilers for all Percy Jackson books, so spoiler warning. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. It will greatly help the channel with the algorithm. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all of my other social medias, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now that I've said that, let's get the video started. Grover Underwood was born into a family of noble searchers, or those who are chosen to look for Pan, the god of the wild and satyrs, who disappeared 2,000 years ago. Grover's father, as well as his uncle Ferdinand, became searchers, but never returned. No satyr had ever returned from this quest of finding Pan, but even as a small boy, Grover believed that he could be the first to complete the quest, find Pan, and return home. This was his dream. To fulfill that dream though, Grover needed to obtain a searcher's license from the Council of Cloven Elders, the thing that grants satyrs the privilege to look for their missing god. Grover aspired to prove himself by accompanying young demigods to Camp Half-Blood, and this led to him finding 3 demigod children, Luke Castellan, Thalia Grace, and Annabeth Chase. He came across the trio traveling together, and he tried to get them safely to Camp Half-Blood. This came with some added challenges though, as Hades, after learning that a child of Zeus had been born, sent monsters after Thalia, that very child, so they had to avoid the forces of the underworld on their way to camp. Along the way, Grover took some wrong turns, which led them into danger with other monsters, including a Cyclops. Grover, the Protector, had to be saved by the youngest demigod in the group, Annabeth Chase. As they came close to the edge of Camp Half-Blood, Thalia stayed back to fight the monsters following them and told Grover to take Luke and Annabeth to camp. Grover did as he was told and safely escorted both of them, but at Thalia's cost. Her father spared her life, turning her into a tree on the camp's borders. Grover almost lost his job because of this, and while Grover claims that it is his fault that they kept making wrong turns, Thalia, upon her return, later told Percy that Luke was the reason because he kept looking for fights with monsters, angry and spiteful. 5 years later, Grover was given a second chance to earn his searcher's license, as he was assigned to Yancey Academy where he met Percy Jackson. He spent enough time befriending Percy to know that he was a demigod, and a powerful one at that. Grover eventually called in Chiron, who took the form of Percy's Latin teacher. Percy thought Grover had been held back a few years due to his facial hair and acne. Really though, he was 28 years old, but satyrs age slowly compared to humans, so he looked a lot younger. Also yes, the show aged him down to 24 and not 28.
I'm actually 24.
But for this video, we're going by the books, so he was 28. On a field trip to a museum, Percy gets in trouble by unknowingly using his godly powers to push Nancy Bobofit into a fountain after she threw her lunch at Grover. This was actually common, as Percy felt like Grover's protector, always saving him from bullies, when really it was supposed to be the other way around. When the pre-algebra teacher Mrs. Dodds turns into a fury and attacks Percy, he uses his instincts to slay her, but is very confused about what happened. Upon discussing the incident with Grover, Grover pretends to not know who Mrs. Dodds is. However, Percy knows that Grover is bluffing when he hesitates on the subject. Later during the school year, Percy overhears Grover talking about him with Mr. Brunner, aka Chiron. Grover reveals that he is Percy's protector, which irritates Percy, as in Percy's eyes, he has been the one protecting Grover. On the last day of school, Grover and Percy take a bus back to New York City, and Grover makes Percy promise to let Grover walk him home. On the way, they see 3 old ladies knitting socks, which greatly distresses Grover, much to Percy's confusion, because he doesn't know that they are actually the 3 Fates. Percy then ditches Grover while Grover is in the bathroom, distressing the satyr quite a bit. Grover then tracks Percy to Montauk Beach, where he and his mom are on vacation. He warns them about the Minotaur, and Percy's mom starts driving them to Camp Half-Blood, which Percy had originally thought of as Grover's summer home. On the way though, they are attacked by the Minotaur, and Grover is knocked unconscious. Percy fights the Minotaur, beats it, and drags Grover over the magical barrier of Camp Half-Blood, which was actually provided by Grover's last failure as a protector, Thalia, whose tree guards the camp. Grover fears that the Council of Cloven Elders won't give him his searcher's license to look for Pan because he failed to bring Percy to camp safely and he lost Percy's mother along the way, so Grover saw it as him failing his second chance. However, the council decides that his fate is still tied to Percy's, so he must wait and accompany Percy whenever he gets his first quest. Percy is very soon assigned a quest to recover Zeus's stolen Master Bolt, and Grover and Annabeth Chase go with him. They must travel to the entrance of the underworld, retrieve the bolt from Hades, who they suspect stole it from Zeus to cause a war, and return it to Zeus by the summer solstice, which is in 10 days. Before their departure, Percy is given flying shoes by Luke as a good luck gift, but Percy gives them to Grover as he is forbidden from air travel courtesy of Zeus, the Lord of the Sky, who hates him. They take a bus west, but the Furies get on the bus as well. After their fight, the bus explodes along with their cash, drachmas, and supplies. They wander around until they find Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium. Auntie M, the owner, is revealed to be Medusa in disguise, and they try to run away from her, but they cannot leave the garden. Grover uses his shoes to fly in the air and hit her with a branch. In the end, Percy chops off her head. Grover then finds out that one of the stone statues in the garden is his uncle Ferdinand, who went to look for Pan and did not return. The trio sacks the store, and Percy mails Medusa's head to Olympus. Grover advised against it, as the gods would take it as a rude gesture, but Percy does not heed Grover's advice. Later, when they are sleeping in the woods, Grover meets an escaped poodle who he can talk to. Grover convinces the dog to let them return him to his home so they can collect the reward money, and they use that money to get tickets for a train ride west. Their first stop is in St. Louis, where Annabeth convinces them to stop at the St. Louis Arch. When they decide to go back down, there is not enough room in the elevator for Percy, so he stays behind with a lady and her chihuahua. The woman reveals herself to be Echidna, and the chihuahua to be the Chimera. Percy can only escape by jumping into the Missouri River, which he does. Grover and Annabeth were terrified about what happened to Percy and were very relieved when they found him. The trio then gets back on the Amtrak train and they head to Denver. All three of them were hungry by the time they reach a restaurant, but all of their money is gone. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you want to look at it, the god Ares walks into the restaurant and pays for their lunch. He also asks them to get a shield back from Waterland, a nearby water park. They find the shield in the Tunnel of Love ride, and while Percy and Annabeth are riding out, they realize they are about to crash. Percy and Annabeth jump out and Grover catches them before they fall on the concrete, being held up by his flying shoes. They return the shield to Ares, who arranges for them to travel to Las Vegas on an animal smuggler's truck. Grover is furious about the harsh conditions the animals are kept in, and when they arrive at Las Vegas, he sets them free with Percy and Annabeth's help. He then gives them a wild blessing which will protect them. In Las Vegas, they check into the Lotus Casino Hotel. There, Grover plays a game where the animals hunt the rednecks, which he really loved, but he is unaware of the danger they're all in. When Percy realizes the casino is meant to trap people, he and Annabeth drag Grover out away from the game. Later, they get a cab to take to Los Angeles, and they pay for the ride with the Lotus Casino's credit card. When they get to Los Angeles, they start wandering around looking for the entrance into the underworld, but they're then attacked by a gang of mortals and they take refuge in a mattress store. The owner named Krusty binds Annabeth and Grover to one of the mattresses, but Percy tricks him and manages to bind him to a mattress, thus slaying Krusty. They find the address of the entrance to the underworld inside the store, and when they get there, they talk Charon, the guard of the underworld, into letting them enter even though they were just mortals. They get past Cerberus, the three-headed dog, see many parts of the underworld, and then when they're near Tartarus, Grover's flying shoes start pulling him towards the pit. Luckily, he's saved when one of the shoes fall off. They then confront Hades and find out that the lightning bolt had appeared in the bag that Ares gave them, and they just barely escape, finding out that Hades was not the one who stole the Master Bolt. In Los Angeles above the underworld, they meet Ares again, and Percy battles him for the lightning bolt as well as the Helm of Darkness, the thing that Hades got stolen from him. Percy wins the fight and he gives the helm to the Furies. The police arrange for them to fly back to New York City, and Percy alone takes the lightning bolt to Olympus, completing the quest. At Camp Half-Blood, Grover is given his searcher's license, and he sets off on his long-awaited journey to find Pan. Grover searches for the god until he gets captured by the Cyclops Polyphemus. Polyphemus thinks that Grover is a female Cyclops, courtesy of Odysseus making him mostly blind, and the Cyclops plans to marry Grover. Grover develops an empathy link with Percy, telling him that he is in danger in his dreams. He then buys time for Percy to rescue him by working on a wedding veil every day and unraveling it when Polyphemus is asleep, so he has to start over. The Cyclops eventually finds out though, and he makes Grover finish the veil. We find out that the reason no satyr ever returned from the quest to find Pan is because Polyphemus has the golden fleece, which the satyrs think is Pan, and they go there. When they go, they get trapped and then eaten by the Cyclops. Percy travels to Polyphemus' island to rescue Grover and to get the golden fleece. Percy, Clarice, Annabeth, Tyson, and Grover defeat Polyphemus, and they sail away with the golden fleece. The golden fleece ends up working its magic too well, and turns Thalia's tree back into Zeus's daughter, Thalia the human. A few months later, Grover is undercover at a school again, and this time he manages to find two possible half-bloods, Bianca and Nico D'Angelo. He calls for Percy, Thalia, and Annabeth's help, and when they get there, a battle with a manticore ensues that ends with Annabeth being captured. Meanwhile, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the moon, promises to look for her, but then she's captured as well. Zoe Nightshade, the lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis, is determined to rescue her goddess. She is visited by the Oracle and gets a prophecy about her future quest. Grover then accompanies Bianca, D'Angelo, Thalia, and Zoe on a quest to save Annabeth and Artemis, who they find out had been captured and forced to hold up the sky to free the evil titan Atlas. Percy follows this group, and he saves them by warning them about the general, aka Atlas. Zoe grudgingly allows him to join the quest, and they journey to New Mexico, where Bianca sacrifices herself. Grover was deeply saddened by the loss of Bianca, because after finally getting Thalia back, he loses another demigod. While Grover is drinking some coffee, they are then visited by the spirit of Pan himself, and Grover falls unconscious from the strength of his presence. He later states that after the quest, he will go back to New Mexico and drink lots of coffee to find Pan and try to repeat what happened last time. They then journey farther and find Annabeth, Artemis, and Atlas. A battle ensues. During the battle, Zoe is killed, Luke is knocked off a cliff by Thalia, and they trick Atlas into holding the sky again. Grover, Percy, Thalia, and Annabeth go to Olympus, and the gods vote on whether or not to kill Percy to avoid the horrible prophecy made about him. Grover is so relieved when he finds out that Percy, his best friend, is allowed to live. Back at Camp Half-Blood, a party started, and when Grover runs around drinking coffee, he hears a voice that says, "I await you," which he believes was Pan. A trial is held on whether Grover may continue his search for Pan or not, led by Linnaeus and the Council of Cloven Elders. Grover's girlfriend Juniper, a tree nymph or a dryad, is introduced, and she is worried over the results of the trial. The other satyrs hold Grover in distaste and don't think that Pan really spoke to him, so they give him 1 week to find Pan and return. Taking the time restraint into account, Grover goes into the Labyrinth with Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson, hoping he will find Pan there. This proves to be a smart move, as Grover finally meets the Lord of the Wild, Pan, who is deep in the Labyrinth, and Grover realizes that he's dying. During the short time they spent with the God of the Wild, Grover was asked by the god to tell everyone he is dead and not to continue the search for him. Pan then praised Grover before he passed on, and his spirit entered all of them, with a little more going into Grover. They returned to Camp Half-Blood and defended against the monsters that are attacking from inside its borders. During this, Grover opens his mouth and lets out a strange, horrible cry that causes the other army to flee. This was the very thing that the god Pan was well known for doing in the first Titan War. Pan had spoken through Grover. When Grover goes before the council and tells of Pan's death, Linnaeus and the other satyrs brand him as a traitor and demand his exile, but Chiron and Dionysus believe and support him. Because Dionysus' vote counts for 2, the council is unable to reach a decision and must be dissolved, allowing Grover to remain. Grover then decides to spread the word of Pan's death and to rally nature spirits together to grant Pan's dying wish, to recreate the wild in their corner of the world. While trying to gain support from nature spirits in Central Park, Grover crosses paths with the god of dreams, Morpheus. When Grover questions what he is doing here, Morpheus explains that he is examining the battlefield, and he puts Grover into a deep sleep for 2 months. Despite no one knowing where Grover is, the Council of Cloven Elders refuse to look for him, as they consider him a deserter and a liar for saying that Pan died. Even after Juniper pleads with Linnaeus to find him, the satyr refuses until Percy becomes angry and yells at him to do something. Ultimately, nothing had to be done, because when Percy and Nico go to Central Park to gain entrance to the underworld, Percy faintly feels his empathy link with Grover, which was still there from when he was captured by Polyphemus a few years ago. They wake up Grover as he falls from a tree, and he had no idea that he was out for as long as he was. He then opens a path to the underworld using his reed pipes for Nico and Percy. Later in the Battle of Manhattan, Grover led a whole army of nature spirits to fight. Linnaeus and several other satyrs played a magical tune on their reed pipes, casting a spell on Hyperion. After the end of the battle, Grover is elected onto the Council of Cloven Elders by Dionysus after Linnaeus was stabbed and killed during the battle. He is also given the position of Lord of the Wild, becoming Pan's heir, Percy even stating that Grover was Pan's chosen one. When Percy went missing, Grover was worried sick about his friend. He tried to use his empathy link, but as we find out, it was being suppressed somehow. Later, when Percy was dreaming, he sees Grover but doesn't remember him, as Hera had taken his memory away. Grover tells Percy to stay put, but eventually Percy turns up at camp, and Grover is so happy to have his friend back. In the House of Hades, Grover is seen with Rachel Elizabeth Dare, Reina Ramirez Arellano, and Octavian in Jason Grace's dream. Rachel went to Reina to deliver a message sent by Annabeth, who was in Tartarus. Grover was there to protect Rachel because the Romans and Greeks weren't exactly at peace at the time. Grover also told the Romans that the nature spirits can feel Gaia stirring, believing that she is on the edge of consciousness. In the Blood of Olympus, Grover is seen with Camp Half-Blood during the Roman invasion as he leads the nymphs and satyrs into battle. He survives the battle, and after consulting with the other nature spirits, announces that they can no longer sense Gaia and believes that the Earth has returned to normal. One day when Grover goes to Percy's house, Percy tells him about his college admission requirements, which is to complete 3 different quests for 3 different gods and get recommendation letters from them. Grover agrees to help after mentioning that Percy has just had his last summer at camp, which makes Grover a bit sad. This quest would give him more time with his best friend. The following day, Grover and Annabeth wait for Percy at Himbo Juice. Percy arrives with Ganymede, the cupbearer of the gods, and Ganymede gives Percy his first quest, which is to locate his stolen chalice. Ganymede suggests the 3 of them question Iris and Hebe, 2 goddesses who hang around Manhattan. After Percy agrees to the quest, Ganymede vanishes, and Grover thinks he knows where to start. They make their way into Times Square, and Grover guides them to a store called Hebe Jeebies. An employee that resembles a 9-year-old girl says that Hebe is by the karaoke bar. There they find some middle-aged patrons singing songs from the Vietnam era. After finding the goddess of youth, Hebe requests they join her for pizza, and as they eat, the trio notices that the patrons singing karaoke are getting younger, and Hebe reveals that she shaves off a few years of people's lives so that those who visit her establishment can have a slight extension on their lives, which makes the trio very unsettled. The 3 then ask Hebe if she has any information about the missing chalice, and the goddess puts together that Ganymede lost the chalice. Hebe then becomes enraged when she realizes that they were accusing her of stealing it. The goddess states that she does not miss her old position and vanishes in an explosion of glitter. The 3 are knocked out, and when they wake up, they are 8 years old. Luckily, Annabeth comes up with a plan. She has Grover go get a baby chick, and he meets them back at the karaoke bar. Soon, Hebe arrives back, and the goddess starts to de-age into an infant. This is because Hebe has to be the youngest in the room, so she became younger than the baby chick. Annabeth promises to get rid of the chick if Hebe reverts them to their true ages and gives them information on the chalice. The goddess agrees, and she suggests that Iris might have it. After leaving, the trio parts ways, and Grover heads back to Camp Half-Blood. A few days later, Grover, Annabeth, and Percy meet Blanche, a daughter of Iris. We're told of a backstory about a campfire at Camp Half-Blood, where Blanche absorbed the colors of all of the campers, making them look black and white, and while they looked like that, she took pictures of them as they were panicked, which greatly impressed Grover for some reason. Grover is excited to see her again, mainly because he wants her to take his picture, which he was going to give as a present to his girlfriend Juniper. Blanche arrives and walks the 3 of them to her mother Iris. Iris happily greets her daughter, and to the trio's surprise, Blanche tells her mother that the 3 of them will blame her for stealing the chalice. The daughter of Iris leaves, but before leaving, she promises to take Grover's picture, though another time, not right now. The 3 speak with the Rainbow Goddess, and Iris agrees to help them look for the chalice, but only if they take her staff to the River of Ellison for cleaning. While Percy and Annabeth had never heard of the River of Ellison, Grover reveals that it was a river that could clean anything, but the god overseeing the river was disgusted by the filth polluting his river. Percy takes Grover as well as Annabeth to Yonkers to clean Iris's staff, and the son of Poseidon leads them to a tunnel he found the previous day. They trudge through a tunnel and reach a vast field full of tall grass and barren trees that house the river. Every inch of the river is filled with snakes, but Annabeth sees an abandoned crevice with no serpents. Grover plays his panpipes to make the snakes follow him, allowing Percy and Annabeth to go to the river. Grover goes on for about as long as he possibly can, and just when he thought he couldn't play anymore, Annabeth meets up with him. Not long after reaching the exit, Percy teleports to them using Iris's now very clean staff. When they bring it to Iris, she gives them special nectar, which they are to follow, and it will lead them to someone called Gary, who Iris thinks stole the chalice. A few days later at Percy's swim meet, Grover comes to watch and shows Percy the pictures Blanche took of him for Juniper. Grover reveals that Juniper was not happy with the photos though, and he also reveals that he mentioned Blanche a dozen times while showing her the pictures. Percy makes Grover realize that Juniper got jealous, and he advises him to apologize to her and ask Juniper what she wants, which turned out to be great advice for Grover, and he did exactly that, mending their relationship. Grover then reveals that he is nervous about Percy and Annabeth leaving him when they go off to college in California, but Percy promises that they will visit. Grover then reveals that he has been talking with nymphs to narrow down the location of the chalice, and this led him to Washington Square Park. A few days later, Percy and Annabeth meet up with Grover, who brought donuts with him, and they go to Washington Square Park. They then unleash 3 drops of the nectar that Iris gave them, and they each go into a different direction following their piece of nectar. As they search, Grover stares at a tree and Annabeth watches a chess game, both trapped in a trance by Garrus, the god of old age, and he admits to Percy, the only one he didn't freeze, that he did in fact steal the chalice. On Percy's orders, the god takes Grover and Annabeth out of the trance he put them under, and they run over. They then get the explanation that Percy will get the chalice if he pins the god's knees to the ground, but if he loses, Percy will be turned to dust. Grover tries to make a different deal, offering to trade the chalice for his donuts, but the god refuses. Grover and Annabeth watch on in horror as Garrus tosses Percy around the playground, and Grover even holds Annabeth back when she tries to intervene. The two are surprised when Percy stops fighting and instead hugs the god. The god could not remember the last time he was hugged, and the fight ended there. He returns the chalice before disappearing, and not long after that, a hula hoop falls from the sky, the hoop being a symbol of Ganymede, meaning he needed the chalice immediately. As they brainstorm, Grover convinces Annabeth to lend Percy her hat, which makes you turn invisible. Grover and Percy then take a cab to the Empire State Building, and Grover tells Percy that the hat will not fool the elevator security guard. To counter this, Grover says that he'll distract him so that Percy can get by. Grover distracts the guards by using the hula hoop that fell from the sky earlier, and Percy snatches the keycard to reach Olympus. Grover is kicked out, getting a warning from the security guard, and he waits for Percy outside. When Percy returns, he fills Grover in on what happened, saying it was a success, and Grover hugs Percy. He tells him that he feared Percy would not survive the wrestling match from earlier, and Percy tells Grover that the thing that gave him the strength in that fight was the thought of the two of them and Annabeth in their old age, still all best friends, which meant a lot to Grover. Grover helps Percy complete 2 more quests, one of which led to Grover and Annabeth house-sitting the goddess Hecate's house. This grants Percy 2 more recommendation letters for college, allowing him to go to New Rome University in California with Annabeth. This was hard for Grover, who was still in New York City, but the 3 friends said that they would talk on a regular basis. Eventually, Grover went to California himself, but he was there with the Council of Cloven Elders to deal with the drought. While he was gone, we find out that Juniper, Grover's girlfriend, greatly missed him while she was back at Camp Half-Blood. As Apollo and Meg McCaffrey are about to leave the way station, Meg searches for the right Cloven guide to help them through the labyrinth, and she summons Grover to help them, saying he was a powerful satyr. 2 days after the quest of the Dark Prophecy started, Grover, Apollo, and Meg had been wandering the labyrinth trying to get to Palm Springs. Grover is concerned and wished that Percy was there with him. One of the creatures that has been chasing them, a Strix, makes its way to the room with 6 or 7 more outside. They are told by the Strix that they were ordered to kill the 3 of them by an emperor. Grover and Meg strengthen their barrier before fleeing with a paralyzed Apollo. The Strix quickly break through the barrier, and Grover uses the Panic Scream, the same thing he used in the Battle of Manhattan, and the ability that Pan gave to him, and this scares the Strix away. They then emerge in Palm Springs, California, and Grover keeps Meg from going back into the labyrinth. Grover then watches over Apollo and Meg as they sleep. When Apollo awakens, he tells Grover about nature spirits dying in natural disasters that do not feel natural. After Meg wakes up, Grover takes the two of them to see his nature spirit friends, and after introducing them, the nature spirits inform him that they are the only scouting party he sent out to return. After Meg faints, Grover and Apollo carry her to a nearby well and meet up with Melly and her infant son. She tells them that Gleason Hedge, a satyr and the father of her child, has not returned from getting supplies, and she asks them to go and find him. Grover and Apollo head out, and Grover tells them that the section of the labyrinth beneath Southern California is infected by the Third Emperor. He also says that he misses Pan, and that despite his best efforts, he cannot save the wild. He feels that this is because most humans and demigods, and some gods, do not care for the wild, making his job very hard. He also says that because of the drought, he lost a lot of friends. They eventually find Coach Hedge's car parked outside Macro's Military Madness, and when they go inside, they find Hedge. In there, the manager tells his employees to kill the satyrs and take the mortal god alive. Grover tells Hedge to open an exit and tells Apollo to activate the automatons with Plan 23. The automatons surround the manager and his employees, and they self-destruct, taking them out, Grover, Hedge, and Apollo making it out just before the explosion. The three head for Hedge's car, and they drive back to base camp. They let the others know what they found, and Grover is disturbed by the identity of the Third Emperor, wondering what to do next. After learning that Jason Grace and Piper McLean might know the location of the Oracle Erythema, he agrees to go with them in the morning. Coach Hedge lends them his car, and Grover, Apollo, and Meg drive to Malibu to meet up with Jason and Piper. They arrive at Piper's house to see movers emptying it. They find her inside, and Piper explains how the organization Triumvirate Holdings ruined her father, and she agrees to join them. They go to downtown Los Angeles, and they find the entrance to the Labyrinth. After taking care of the guard, the four head to the service elevator. Minutes later, they run into two injured dryads that were two of Grover's scouts. Grover and Meg do what they can until Grover decides to take them above ground, and Grover heals them before they pass out. Grover takes them back for a proper healing, meaning he stayed behind while Meg, Piper, and Apollo go to Jason in Pasadena. When the others return, Grover is told about the death of Jason Grace. Grover wonders how they were going to tell Thalia this and is deeply saddened, but he agrees to join Apollo and Meg in finding the Oracle. They go to an abandoned Los Angeles zoo, much to Grover's discomfort, and they find the entrance locked in a bear pit. Grover opens it, and he along with Apollo and Meg go inside. They eventually come to a puzzle, and when they get it wrong, they fall when the floor vanishes beneath them, revealing the fire of Helios. Grover grabs Apollo and Meg before they reach the flames though. After Helios leaves, the three move on, and they eventually meet Medea. Apollo is subdued, and Grover and Meg perform a song of nature, but they are imprisoned in a vortex. Luckily, Piper arrives, and she kills Medea, freeing them. The room starts to collapse, and they get out of the labyrinth just in time. After all of this, Grover returns to Camp Half-Blood and bids farewell and good luck to Meg and Apollo. After Percy and Annabeth celebrate graduating high school, instead of staying in New York, Grover goes with them to the West Coast as they start college, keeping the trio together. In the novel The Sun and the Star, Nico D'Angelo and Will Salas contact Grover before their quest to Tartarus, and Grover helps them. As of right now, that is the entire life of Grover Underwood, told throughout 17 different books. If you like this one, I have a ton of other Percy Jackson videos and some other fandom videos as well. If you're so inclined, check them out, and to help with the algorithm of this channel, press that like button and subscribe. That's all I have for today though, so I'll see you in the next video.